The planet Eric 7 had always been a quiet, secluded world, far from the bustling trade routes of the galaxy. It was an uncharted oasis in the vast expanse of space, a planet with dense forests, towering mountains, and sparkling lakes. Its isolation made it the perfect location for the Empire to build its newest project, a Class 13 containment zone. This zone was meant to imprison the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy, beings too powerful or unpredictable to be contained by any other means. What the Empire didn't know, however, was that humans had already settled on Eric 7 long before the Empire's arrival. They lived in secret, a colony of survivors, cut off from the rest of the galaxy. These humans were not the warriors or conquerors the galaxy feared. They were farmers, artisans, and scholars, choosing to live quietly and simply far from the reach of the Empire's influence. Their existence had remained hidden, even from their own people, as they kept their presence a well-guarded secret. The settlers on Eric 7 had learned how to survive with the land and coexisted peacefully with the planet's wildlife, not daring to attract any unwanted attention. But all of that was about to change. For years, the humans lived their lives, unaware of the approaching threat. It wasn't until one of their scouts, a young man named Darius, stumbled upon the Empire's construction site that the first signs of danger appeared. Darius was assigned the responsibility of exploring the nearby regions to map out any possible threats, and he had done so many times without issue. But today, something was different. As Darius climbed to the top of a rocky hill overlooking the valley below, he saw the gleaming structures rising in the distance. Large cranes moved across the landscape, unloading massive blocks of metal and other materials from hovering ships. He squinted, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. His eyes widened in shock when he saw the familiar symbols of the Galactic Empire stamped on every ship and structure. The Empire was here, and they were building something massive. Darius's heart raced as he quickly descended the hill. His first instinct was to report back to the colony, but he knew it would be too dangerous to rush into action without a plan. The Empire was known for its swift and decisive tactics, and if they discovered the humans, it would be their end. Darius could already picture the outcome. The Class 13 containment zone would be constructed, and everyone inside its boundaries would be trapped. The humans would have no way to escape. He needed to gather more information, but he also needed to get back to the colony before the Empire's project reached full completion. As Darius made his way back to the colony, he thought of his people, the farmers, the builders, the teachers. They had lived their lives in peace, never once thinking that such a force could come to their doorstep. They had no weapons to defend themselves, no trained soldiers to fight off an imperial invasion. What could they do against an empire that had conquered countless star systems? He doubted anyone in the colony had even heard of a Class 13 containment zone, let alone understood the full extent of what it meant. When he arrived at the colony, Darius found the council already in session, discussing the crop yields and preparing for the upcoming harvest. No one was aware of the looming threat, and Darius knew he had to act fast. "Darius, what news do you bring?" asked Nia, the leader of the colony, her voice filled with the usual calmness of someone who had never known real conflict. Darius took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. He couldn't afford to alarm them, but he also couldn't ignore the urgency of the situation. He stepped forward, his voice low but steady. "We're in danger," he said, his voice catching the attention of everyone in the room. "The Empire is building a containment zone on Eric 7. It's a Class 13 facility, and they plan to trap everything inside. That means us." The room fell silent. The council members exchanged confused looks. Nia's expression softened, but she didn't fully grasp the weight of his words. "A containment zone? What does that have to do with us?" Nia asked, her voice gentle. Darius looked around at the faces of his people, unsure of how to explain it any further. He knew he couldn't just tell them that they were being hunted by the Empire. They had no frame of reference for such an idea. They had never been in a situation where their lives were at risk from an outside force. They had lived in peace for generations. The Empire doesn't just capture creatures, Darius continued, his voice growing more urgent. They capture entire populations. They'll confine us, put us in pens, and keep us there for the rest of our lives, or worse. Some of the council members began to stir, a few standing up and whispering among themselves. Nia's face turned pale as the realization set in. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice trembling. Darius nodded, stepping forward and showing her the data he had gathered from his reconnaissance. He had taken scans of the Empire's base and had mapped out the location of the containment zone's boundaries. The map showed that it would encompass the entire valley, the area where their colony was situated. No one would escape. Nia's face hardened, and she turned to the rest of the council. "We must prepare," she said firmly. "We cannot let them take us. We will fight." The words echoed in Darius's mind. They would fight, but how could they? The humans had no weapons, no military experience. They were farmers, builders, and craftsmen. What could they do against the might of the Empire? He didn't have the answer, but he knew that they had to try. Time was running out. As the council began to discuss their next steps, Darius silently vowed to do everything in his power to protect his people. He would find a way to stop the Empire, even if it meant sacrificing everything. The battle for Erix's 7 had just begun. The moment Darius had shared the news of the Empire's plans with the council, the mood in the colony shifted. What had once been a peaceful, prosperous community now felt like a place on the brink of destruction. The weight of the situation was heavy in every room. The Empire's project, a Class 13 containment zone, was not something they could ignore. The council quickly called for an emergency meeting, gathering everyone who could be of help. Nia, the leader, stood at the head of the table, her expression calm but determined. "We have little time," she said, her voice steady but low. "The Empire will finish building that containment zone soon. Darius, what do we know about their timetable?" Darius had spent hours observing the Empire's workers from afar, memorizing every movement. He knew the Empire's efficiency was their greatest strength, and that speed was their greatest weapon. The containment zone, a vast and elaborate structure, was rising too quickly to ignore. He had learned that they were ahead of schedule and would finish within the next week. "The construction is moving faster than we thought," Darius replied, his voice grave. "They have all the resources they need, and it's clear they plan to trap everything inside within days. We're not just in danger, we're already part of their plan." The council members sat in stunned silence for a moment, each of them processing the news in their own way. Nia was the first to speak again, her eyes scanning the group. "Then we have no choice but to act," she declared firmly. "We will not hide. We will not wait for the Empire to come to us. It is time to fight back." There was a murmur of agreement from the council, but the weight of her words sank in. None of them had ever fought before. Their lives had been built on farming, trade, and community. Now they had to become something else, something they had never imagined. "What can we do?" asked Kale, a former engineer who had lived on the planet for most of his life. "We have no weapons, no army, no way to stand against them." Darius looked around at the people he had grown up with, people he had called family for years. Kale was right. How could a group of farmers and artisans stand against the might of the Empire? They had no training, no soldiers, nothing that could help them in the face of such an overwhelming force. "We don't have weapons," Darius said slowly. "But we have something else. We know this planet better than they ever will. We know the terrain, we know the wildlife, and we know how to survive in a way they never could." The council members exchanged uncertain glances. They had lived in harmony with the planet's wilderness. But this was different. The Empire's military would not be easily outsmarted. "We can't fight the Empire directly," Darius continued, "but we can sabotage their efforts. We can slow them down. We can break their supply lines, destroy their communications, and make it harder for them to finish the containment zone. Every delay buys us more time." Nia nodded slowly. She understood the necessity of this plan, even if it seemed like a small victory in the grand scheme of things. "Then we will do it," she said firmly. "We will fight the only way we can. We will make it impossible for them to complete the zone." The council quickly organized into small groups, each tasked with specific duties. Some would focus on gathering resources and supplies, while others would start preparing the land for the defense. Kale and a few others began to construct traps and makeshift weapons. The colony's engineers, under Kale's direction, worked to sabotage the Empire's machines, hoping to cause as much chaos as possible. But everyone knew they were working with limited time and limited tools. Meanwhile, Darius had one more task to complete. He knew he needed to find a way to communicate with other nearby settlements. They couldn't face the Empire alone, and any help they could gather would be crucial. But there was a problem. The Empire had already taken control of all the communication channels. Darius had learned of an abandoned relay station a few hours' journey from the colony. It was an old facility, once used by explorers and settlers long before the Empire had arrived. The relay station was mostly forgotten, but it still had the equipment necessary to send a distress signal to anyone who could help. He decided it was time to go there. Before he left, he spoke with Nia one last time. She gave him a long, searching look, as though she were trying to read his mind. "You're certain this will work?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. "It's our only option," Darius replied. "If I can get to that station, I can send a signal. We might not get help in time, but we'll have done everything we could." Nia nodded. "Then go. Be careful, and come back to us." Darius set off immediately, his heart pounding. He had no time to waste. The Empire was closing in, and every second counted. As he journeyed toward the relay station, the weight of the responsibility pressed down on him. He wasn't just trying to save his own life. He was trying to save the lives of everyone he loved, everyone who depended on him. As Darius made his way through the dense forests and rocky terrain, he encountered several challenges. The land wasn't easy to navigate, especially for someone in a rush. But the one advantage he had over the Empire was that he knew every inch of the land. He had grown up here, played here, and survived here. It was his home, and no one knew it better. When he finally reached the relay station, he found it, as he had expected, rusted and neglected but still functional. With quick, practiced hands, he powered up the station and began to send a message, hoping that someone would hear it. As the signal pulsed out into the vast expanse of space, Darius could only hope that it would be enough. Back at the colony, the preparations continued. Each person was doing their part, working tirelessly to build what they could and prepare for the worst. But Darius knew they couldn't keep up this pace for long. They needed help, fast. And as he looked up at the distant stars, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. The Empire was coming, and they were ready to do whatever it took to finish what they had started. Days had passed since Darius sent out his distress signal, and the tension in the colony continued to build. The humans had worked tirelessly to prepare, but they knew they could only delay the Empire for so long. The containment zone's construction was progressing fast, and with each passing hour, the Empire's forces grew closer. Darius had not yet returned from his mission to the relay station, and the uncertainty of his success weighed heavily on everyone. Nia had gathered the council together again to discuss their next steps. The once peaceful settlement now looked more like a makeshift war camp, with barricades and traps scattered around the perimeter. Tools that were once used for farming and building were now being repurposed into weapons. "We can't wait forever," Nia said, looking around at the group. "We need a plan in case Darius doesn't make it back. We can't rely on just one signal. The Empire is too powerful, and they won't hesitate to strike if they discover we're here." The council members nodded solemnly. Their small community was no match for the might of the Empire. Kyle, the engineer, spoke up, his voice low but firm. "I've been working on something," Kale said, lifting a small mechanical device from the table in front of him. It looked like a modified detonator with wires and switches attached. "This is an EMP pulse generator. If we set it up near the Empire's construction site, we might be able to disable their equipment for a while. It won't destroy the containment zone, but it will delay their progress." "It's a start," Nia agreed, but she knew it wasn't enough. They needed something more decisive. They needed a way to disrupt the Empire's plans on a larger scale. "Darius has to come back," Nia murmured to herself, looking out over the valley. He has to bring that signal back with him. It's our only hope. Meanwhile, Darius was on his way back to the colony, though he didn't know it yet. His mission to the relay station had been successful, but he had no way of knowing if the signal had reached its destination. The journey had been dangerous, and he had narrowly avoided the Empire's patrols more than once. His mind raced with thoughts of the colony, of Naya, and of the impending doom they all faced. As Darius made his way through the dense forest, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The trees around him, once familiar and comforting, now felt oppressive. The rustling of leaves seemed louder, and the crack of twigs underfoot sounded like thunder in the silence. It was as if the planet itself was holding its breath, waiting for the Empire to strike. Suddenly, Darius froze. His sharp eyes caught movement in the distance, figures hidden in the trees, moving with military precision. Imperial soldiers. The Empire had found him. He dropped to the ground, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew he couldn't outrun them, not without risking the entire colony's safety. He needed to think fast. With a quick glance around, Darius spotted a small cave hidden behind a thicket of vines. It wasn't much of a hiding spot, but it was better than nothing. He scrambled toward it, hoping the soldiers hadn't seen him. As Darius crawled into the cave, his mind raced. He had to get back to the colony to warn Nia. He had to tell her that the Empire was close, that they would soon come for them. But how could he get past the soldiers without being seen? The EMP device Kyle had created might buy them some time, but they would need more than just a delay. They needed a full-on disruption, a way to strike back. The hours dragged on as Darius lay low in the cave, hoping the soldiers would pass. His stomach rumbled, but he dared not make a sound. As the night wore on, the Empire's patrols moved farther into the forest, unaware that they had just missed him. But the tension didn't lift from Darius's shoulders. He knew that time was running out. By the time morning came, Darius decided to risk it. He knew he had to warn the colony, even if it meant confronting the Empire directly. He had no choice. The Empire would stop at nothing to finish the containment zone, and the colony had no way of defending itself without help. Carefully, he emerged from the cave and began his journey back to the colony. He moved as quietly as possible, knowing the Empire's patrols were still in the area, but luck was on his side for the time being. He reached the outskirts of the colony just as the sun began to rise. As Darius approached the main camp, he saw that the people were preparing for something. He was relieved to see that Nia was still there, overseeing the last-minute preparations. His heart swelled with hope, but as he walked closer, he could see that something was different. There was an urgency in the air, a sense of finality. Nia turned as Darius approached, her eyes wide with relief. "Darius!" she exclaimed, rushing to meet him. "You're back! We were starting to—" Before she could finish, a loud explosion cut through the air, sending a wave of shock through the ground. The force of the blast shook the trees around them. Darius turned sharply, instinctively reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. "Get down," he yelled, grabbing Nia and pulling her to the ground as debris rained down from above. The explosion had come from the direction of the Empire's construction site. Darius didn't hesitate. "They've found us," he said grimly. "The Empire is here. We have no more time." Nia looked around, her expression steely. She stood up, dusting herself off. "Then we fight." Darius could see the determination in her eyes, the same fire that had been ignited in him when he first realized what they were up against. The Empire had thought they could build a containment zone without considering the humans already living on the planet. They had underestimated them, and now it was time for the humans to prove just how wrong the Empire was. The countdown to their survival had begun. The rumbling explosion had set the colony on high alert. Panic spread quickly through the settlers as they scrambled to prepare for what was coming. Darius stood with Nia, watching the smoke rising from the distance. The Empire had found them. There was no turning back now. "Gather the others," Darius said urgently, his voice sharp. "We need to move fast. They'll be here soon, and we need to make sure we're ready." Nia nodded, her face grim. She immediately turned to the others, giving orders to the leaders of different groups. As she moved through the colony, Darius stayed behind, his mind racing. He had hoped for a little more time to strategize, time to regroup, but that time had run out. They had no more luxury of thinking things through. They had to act now, or they would all be doomed. The makeshift barricades they had set up were crude, but they were all they had. Kale, the engineer, had worked tirelessly to create traps and barriers to slow down the Empire's forces. Now those barriers would be their only line of defense. The sounds of boots crunching on the ground echoed from the edge of the forest. The Empire was coming. "Darius, we're ready," Nia called, returning to his side with a group of determined men and women. Their faces were set in grim expressions, but Darius could see the fire in their eyes. They knew what was at stake. They were ready to fight. He nodded, taking a deep breath. "Then let's make sure they regret ever stepping foot on our planet." Empire's forces were vast. Darius knew that the Empire had no intention of negotiating. They didn't care about peaceful resolutions. The Empire only understood power. And now, it was time to show them what the humans were capable of. The first wave of soldiers appeared at the edge of the forest, their dark armor glinting in the sun. They moved with military precision, unaware of the traps that had been set for them. Darius and his team positioned themselves in the trees using the natural landscape to hide their movements. The plan was simple: ambush, disable, and delay the enemy for as long as possible. Kale's EMP pulse device was the first line of defense. As the soldiers advanced, the pulse was triggered, sending out a massive wave of electromagnetic energy. For a few moments, the Empire's equipment faltered. The lights on their transports flickered and several of their weapons powered down. It was only a temporary setback, but it was enough to throw them off guard. The humans had the advantage, if only for a moment. "Now," Darius shouted, signaling the others to move into position. The first trap was sprung. A series of explosive charges planted along the path detonated, sending a shockwave through the air. The soldiers were thrown off balance, and several of them were knocked to the ground by the blast. The humans moved quickly, taking advantage of the confusion. The settlers fought with everything they had, using whatever weapons they had managed to create. Darius wielded a makeshift spear, while Nia led a group of archers, sending arrows with precision toward the Empire's soldiers. For a moment, it seemed like the humans might actually stand a chance. The Empire's forces were caught off guard, and their discipline was shaken. But it didn't take long for the Empire's superior numbers and technology to come into play. Reinforcements quickly arrived, and the soldiers regrouped, now better prepared for the resistance they faced. Humans didn't give up, though. They had one advantage the Empire couldn't take away: their knowledge of the land. Darius led the charge into the trees, taking the battle off the beaten path and into the dense forest. The Empire's soldiers struggled to keep up in the thick undergrowth, their heavy armor and advanced weapons proving less useful in the unfamiliar terrain. "We need to push them back, further into the forest," Darius called to Nia, who was already directing the others. The fight was far from over, but they had managed to slow the Empire's advance. Now they needed to finish what they had started. Nia nodded, rallying the fighters. "Keep pushing. We cannot let them reach the village." The humans' strategy was simple but effective. They knew they couldn't stand toe-to-toe with the Empire in a direct fight, but they could make it as difficult as possible for them to reach their goal. As the Empire's forces advanced deeper into the forest, they found themselves surrounded on all sides by hidden fighters. The humans used guerrilla tactics, hit and run, ambushes from above, traps that took out whole squads. Each successful strike was a small victory, each victory a message to the Empire. The humans would not go down without a fight. But the Empire was relentless. Slowly, they began to adapt. They brought in more powerful units, including war machines designed to clear out difficult terrain. The machines rolled forward, cutting a path through the forest with destructive force. The humans could only slow them down, not stop them. Darius watched in horror as the machines advanced, their massive legs crushing everything in their path. There was no way the colony could withstand that kind of firepower. But then, a plan formed in his mind, a desperate, dangerous plan. It would require every last bit of bravery the humans had. But if it worked, it could turn the tide in their favor. "Kale," Darius shouted over the roar of the machines. "I need you to rig up everything we have left, explosives, traps, anything, to take down those machines. We don't have much time." Kale nodded without question, already moving, to gather the remaining explosives. The others quickly followed, setting up the traps one last time. It was a gamble, but it was the only shot they had. As the Empire's war machines neared the heart of the forest, Darius and the others took their positions. The humans' final stand was about to begin. The first machine entered the trap zone, and Kale's device activated. Explosions erupted from every direction, tearing through the machine's defenses. The machines staggered, their movements becoming erratic as the humans' final plan went into action. The earth shook with each explosion, and Darius felt a surge of hope. It was working. But then the machines began to retaliate, firing their weapons with devastating power. The humans had to act fast. With a final desperate charge, Darius and his team rushed forward. The war machines were still reeling from the blasts, but they weren't out of the fight yet. The humans needed to finish them off, once and for all. The battle raged on, but the humans were no longer fighting to survive. They were fighting to win. And in that fight, they would prove to the Empire that they were not just a small, quiet colony. They were humanity, and they would not be easily defeated. The forest was eerily quiet after the last explosion. The smoke from the destroyed war machines still hung in the air, thick and heavy, mixing with the scent of burned wood. The battle had been brutal. The humans had fought with everything they had, but it came at a cost. The once lively and peaceful colony now lay in ruins, its landscape scarred by the violence of war. Darius stood at the edge of the battlefield, his body exhausted and bruised, his mind still trying to process the events that had unfolded. The battle had been won, but not without sacrifice. Many of the settlers had fallen in the fight, men and women who had never once imagined they would need to fight for survival. "Is everyone accounted for?" Darius asked, turning to Naya, who had been coordinating the defense throughout the battle. Her face was streaked with dirt, her eyes tired but determined. "Most are accounted for," Naya replied, her voice steady, but filled with sorrow. "We've lost a few, but the rest are safe. The Empire's forces were pushed back, but I fear they won't be gone for long. They'll regroup and return." Darius nodded grimly. He knew Nia was right. The Empire wouldn't give up so easily. The destruction of the war machines and the defeat of their soldiers had been a blow, but the Empire's power was vast, and their thirst for control would not be easily quenched. The humans had bought themselves some time, but it wouldn't last forever. "We can't stay here," Darius said, his voice firm. "We need to move quickly. We can't risk the Empire coming back and finishing what they started." Nia agreed. "We'll gather what we can and make for the highlands. There's an old mining settlement there, abandoned for years. It should be safe for now. But we can't take everything. We need to travel light." The humans began to gather their belongings, preparing for the long journey ahead. The devastation of the battlefield was hard to ignore, but they had no choice. The Empire was relentless, and they needed to find a way to survive. Darius and Nia walked through the colony, speaking with the survivors, offering comfort where they could. The loss was heavy, but there was no time to mourn. The future was uncertain, and they had to focus on what lay ahead. "We've come so far," Nia said quietly, looking at the remains of their once thriving settlement. "But we can't stop now. We have to keep moving forward." Darius placed a hand on her shoulder, offering a silent nod of agreement. They had come far, yes, but the road ahead would be even harder. Still, they had one thing the Empire didn't: hope. And as long as they had that, they would keep fighting. The survivors moved out in groups, leaving behind the wreckage of their old lives. Darius, Nia, and a small group of volunteers set out first, scouting the path to the mining settlement. The journey would be long, but it was the only option they all had. As they walked, Darius couldn't help but think of the people they had lost. They had given everything for this moment, and now it was up to those who remained to ensure their sacrifice had meaning. The trek through the forest was arduous. The trees, once a symbol of peace, now felt like a constant reminder of the battle that had taken place. But Darius was determined to push forward. The higher ground would give them a strategic advantage, and the mining settlement would provide them with shelter and resources to rebuild. As they reached the foot of the mountains, Darius saw the first signs of the old settlement. The buildings were dilapidated, covered in moss and vines, but they still stood. The settlement had once been a hub of activity, a place where miners worked to extract valuable minerals from the mountainside. Now it was empty, abandoned after the last of the miners had left years ago. But it was perfect for what the humans needed, a safe haven for now. The group made their way inside, clearing out the debris and making the place habitable again. It wasn't much, but it was a start. They set up camp in the main building, and Darius went to work organizing the survivors. They needed to secure the area, gather food, and rebuild what they could. It wasn't the home they had lost, but it was a chance to start over. As the sun began to set, Darius sat outside the settlement, staring out at the vast expanse of the valley below. The sky was a mix of warm colors, reds and oranges blending into the darkening blue. For the first time since the battle, Darius allowed himself a moment of peace. The war wasn't over, but they had made it through the first hurdle. They had won a small victory, and that victory was enough to give him hope. Nia joined him, sitting beside him in silence for a few moments. The weight of their losses hung in the air, but neither of them spoke about it. They both knew the road ahead would be difficult, but they also knew that they were not alone. The survivors were strong, and together they could rebuild. "We've come this far, Darius," Nia said finally, breaking the silence. "We can't stop now. We'll rebuild. We'll make them see that they can't take us down." Darius smiled faintly, his heart lifting at her words. "We will. We'll rebuild stronger than before." The Empire may have thought they could crush the humans without a second thought, but they had underestimated them. The humans had proven their strength, their resilience, and their ability to fight back. And as long as they had that, they would keep pushing forward. The survivors of Eric 7 had lost much, but they had gained something even more important: the will to survive. The battle wasn't over, but the humans had shown that they would not be easily defeated. Together, they would rise from the ashes and build a future, no matter what the Empire had in store for them. And with that, a new chapter began. The humans of Eric 7 were ready to fight for their home, their freedom, and their future. The Empire had only seen the beginning. The humans were just getting started. Too many